Right.
So the Bob, the date that you mentioned, May 23rd, 1844,
When it started.
was the date that the Bob revealed to, at that time, there was a great millennial zeal, certainly in the East, but also in the West. There were a group, the Millerites, who have now morphed into the Seventh-day Adventists, who believed that it was time for the return of Jesus or the coming of the Messiah, but that something was happening in the world.
Something new?
Something new, that they were looking for the fulfillment of the prophecies of the past. And in Iran and Iraq, there was this school of thought that focused on the coming of the promised one.
Right.
And the Bob, and I mean, this is a whole story. In fact, I'm rereading it for probably the 14th time. The Bob was the one who proclaimed to one of the students who was searching for the promised one that he was the promised one. And there were certain criteria that they were looking for that would have to be produced or said. And in this case, the Bob was the promised one, would unasked, would produce a commentary on a surah written in the Quran, would explain the meaning of this particular surah. And the Bab did that with Mullah Hussein, and that began the Babi religion, and it spread like wildfire throughout Iran, and many of its followers were martyred. 20,000 of them were martyred because they became followers, and of course they threatened the clergy.
Threatened the followers, yep.
And Baha'u'llah became a follower of the Bab. They never met, but he became a follower.
And then I think the Bob got
The Bab was martyred.
murdered. Yeah.
He was martyred in 1850 in the city of Tabriz. That's an exciting story. I don't know if you came across the story, but I don't know.
I figured out that he was. I read that he was murdered because obviously.
He was murdered?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? No.
No.
No. He was taken into the square, and he was strung up with one of his followers, and he was shot to death. But the story of how that all happened is quite a miraculous story. Now, for the record, miracles happen, but those are not the proofs to a Baha'i of the validity, because Baha'u'llah said a miracle is only meaningful to the people who see it.
Right.
But it is a story that was very documented by many European historians who were in and were very fascinated with the Babi religion. And they recorded exactly what had taken place. What had taken place is that the Bab was talking to his secretary, his amanuensis, and giving instruction because he was being sentenced to die. Well, what they should do, what they should be doing after his death. And they came and took him away, and he said, "I'm not finished speaking." In the meantime, the regiment that was brought in to shoot him was a Christian regiment, and the person who was in charge came to the Bab and said, I'm a Christian, and I bear you no ill will. I'm not happy about doing this. And the Bab told him, do what you were instructed, and God will protect you. And so one of the Bab's followers the night before asked to be martyred with him, and the two of them were strung up together in the square with 10,000 people looking on.
Right.
This was a big deal. And when they shot their rifles, 750 rifles, the Bab was gone. They found him back in his cell with the amanuensis. And when he was finished talking, I mean, that must have been quite shocking. When he finished talking, he said, "Now I'm ready." In the meantime, Samcon left, and they brought in another regiment. And this time, they strung them up, and they were successful. But the face of the Bob was not shattered at all. His body was taken by his followers and carried from 1850 to, I believe it was 1912, when it was interred.
It's a long time.
A long time. The body was wrapped, was hidden in a silk factory, in all kinds of places, so that it would eventually be properly buried.
Right.
And
Once
now,
at a time.
and now it is in this magnificent building.
Which
It's
is that?
Yeah, and that was taken a long time ago before all these terraces were built, so you don't see it.
Right.
You couldn't see it like that today. It has different construction around it. But that is a very brief story of the Bob. And he said that he had come to prepare the way for one who was much greater than he.
Right.
And that eventually was
Baha'u'llah.
Baha'u'llah, who follows his teachings. And,
Yes. He said, he was very clear in all of his writings that he was the forerunner, that he had come to prepare the people for the coming of Baha'u'llah. And so indeed, Baha'u'llah was a follower of the Bab's, and he declared himself in Baghdad in 1863. The history is very rich, and it's very accessible.
Yeah, it's not that long ago.
It's not
Exactly.
that long ago, and it was documented, it was written down. I mean, there is, in this whole complex of buildings, there's a building that is, well, you go on pilgrimage for 9 days. Yeah.
And this pilgrimage is for
It's for visiting the Baha'i holy places, it's for praying at the shrines.
is it required or not required?
It is required that once in your lifetime you make, now, if you can't, you can't, but it is highly recommended.
Suggested.
It is highly recommended, yes, that you do it, and it's a great experience.
At least
Imagine,
once.
imagine if you could, if you're a Christian, if you could walk, really walk, and stand in a room that Jesus had been in. That is the opportunity.
The feeling that you had.
That we have. Now, in times to come, when there are huge numbers of people who are Baha'is, they won't be able to get that up close and personal, because you could not, those rooms would wear out in no time. But you do know that this is the house that Baha'u'llah lived in. These are the places that he was. This is where he walked. And now, so you want me to play some music?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, this is the bay of Haifa, and then this is Akka across the way. Yeah, it's quite beautiful. And when they light it up at night,
I'm talking about
Yeah,
this,
when the lights
like
turn
the
on.
steps, kind of, not steps, but
well, there are.
this certain picture, yeah.
In fact, we don't have the time now. You can come back sometime, but I have a